Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Community Innovation in Youth Homelessness Prevention, presented by Making the Shift. Making the Shift is a youth homelessness social innovation lab that funds, conducts, prototypes, and mobilizes cutting-edge research to prevent and end youth homelessness in Canada. Today's webinar features the winners of the 2022 Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Prevention Awards, the Momma Moments program, from Choices for Youth, and Safe at Home from StepStones for Youth. The Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Prevention Awards highlights innovative community programs that are exemplary of what is possible in preventing youth homelessness in Canada. Special thanks to Canada Life, our presenting donor of the Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Prevention Awards. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type them into the question box. We will leave time for audience questions at the end of the webinar. We are recording today's webinar also, and we will post the recording at www.makingtheshiftinc.ca. And since we are gathering online today, a singular land acknowledgement does not capture the richness of our many locations. Making the Shift is hosted at York University in Toronto, so we will share their land acknowledgement, and we invite all guests to consider their own position regarding the land in which they find themselves. We acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now I'd like to introduce our two co-moderators for today, Dr. Stephen Gaetz and Marian Jones from Canada Life. Thanks so much for joining us today and helping to facilitate our conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm Stephen Gaetz. I'm a professor at York University, and I run the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. I co-lead Making the Shift with Melanie Redman of Away Home Canada, and together our body of work was designated as a United Nations Center of Excellence last year. So that's basically an quick overview, and I'm going to hand it over to Marian now.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marian Jones, and I'm pleased to be here on behalf of Canada Life. I am a senior program manager, and I oversee our community investment program at the national level. And we're really proud to support this award program and are excited to hear from this year's winners and engage in these important discussions today. So I'd like to ask Jeannie and Heather to now join us on screen. Hi, Heather. Hi, Jeannie. So I'll now introduce our presenters today. Jeannie is a program coordinator at Choices for Youth. Her over 19 years at Choices for Youth, her primary role and deepest passion is the work she does with the families through the Momma Moments and Family and Natural Supports program. Jeannie spent 10 years in foster care as a young child and was adopted by her foster family a few weeks before her 12th birthday. Her lived experience, passion, and personal circumstances has helped mold who she is today as a wife, mom, nan, and professional. Welcome, Jeannie. I'd now like to introduce Heather. Heather O'Keefe founded StepStones for Youth and has successfully brought this registered charity from a small grassroots volunteer-run organization to a respected industry leader today. She believes that Ontario can do better at raising the youth in our foster care system, and with a greater focus on supporting youth to increase educational attachment, employment, and housing stability. The greater community benefits, and with extensive work experience in child protection, personal experience as a foster parent, and her work at StepStones for Youth, Heather is a respected and leading visionary in the field of child welfare. Welcome, Heather.
Great. I want to welcome Jeannie and Heather as well. I'm really looking forward to the presentations. As award winners, there was a lot of competition, and the excellence of what you're doing and the innovation is something to marvel at and embrace. We do these awards because, of course, too long in the world of homelessness, we basically ignored prevention, and we wait for people to fall into homelessness and then wait again until they're sick enough or old enough to get the kind of housing and supports they need. And we believe that we can do things differently and produce way better outcomes for people. So welcome. I'm going to do a quick overview of homelessness prevention now. So give me 1 second here. Well, that's not it. Okay, here we go. There we go. So the idea of preventing homelessness has been one that we've been really working on for the past 10 years. About 5 or 6 years ago, we released the very first kind of definition of prevention of homelessness. We followed a couple of years later by the roadmap for the prevention of youth homelessness. So these were documents designed to kind of lay out, what are we talking about when we say prevention? What does it look like, and why should we do it? So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're talking about here, and just remind, or not remind you, because I didn't say it, but to let you know that the presentation on the definition of prevention is an updated one from what we did several years ago. But we start with the problem we're trying to solve here. So, you know, when we let young people become mired in homelessness, and we have to be mindful that it's we who are doing this, several things happen. People's health declines. People's mental health declines. People experience trauma on the streets. Many young people are forced to drop out of school, not because they don't like school or that kind of thing. It's just, it's very hard to maintain that kind of structured life when you don't have the supports that you need. In spite of young people who experience homelessness being framed as people we should be afraid of, the research shows conclusively that they are much more likely to be victims of crime than perpetrators of crime. And they're also, so that's an important thing to consider. Many have involvement with the law, not necessarily because they've been victimized, but because a lot of police attention is placed on that. There's greater risk of substance use disorders, as many people try to cope with life on the streets through medicating themselves, which I don't think should be a surprise. And if we wait too long, people become entrenched on the streets, and the damage sets in, and it becomes really challenging to help people leave. So maybe we should do something different. Now, one of the positive things in Canada is that the government of Canada, when it announced its homelessness strategy, really made a commitment to supporting communities to engage in the prevention of homelessness. And so these are the 5 mandatory outcome areas for community entities in Canada. And you'll note that 2 of these highlight prevention. That's a radical policy shift. And just before the holidays, this was really a surprise. In the United States, they announced or released their homelessness strategy, and prevention's front and center on it. So we're at the moment where a lot of change is happening. And so what we're talking about here today is youth homelessness prevention. And the question is, like, why is that a priority? And I've got a couple of slides, data slides. This is my favorite data slide from 2022. Looking forward to what comes up this year. This comes from the Government of Canada. So during the 2018 point in time count, we asked them, could they ask people who are currently experiencing homelessness, how old were they when they first experienced homelessness? And if you look at this table, this period between, say, 12 and 20 is when there's a massive amount of people who are experiencing homelessness for the first time. And their data also showed that half of all currently homeless people had their first experience before they were 25. So this is pretty powerful information, because it suggests we're not doing good enough by our young people. And B, if we were to really be successful in addressing youth homelessness through prevention, we would likely have a long-term impact on chronic homelessness in Canada. So I'm going to show you one other piece of data. This is when we were just focusing on people under 25. How old were they when they first experienced homelessness? And the sad answer is 40% reported that their first experience was before they were even 16 years old. right? And that group is different from those who had later experiences of homelessness, more likely to have adverse childhood experiences, more likely to be involved in child protection, more likely to be bullied at school, have learning disabilities, these kinds of things. And the problem in Canada is that in most communities, for this group, we do nothing. They have to wait until they're 16 in some places 18 before they get help. So all of this suggests we need to move in the direction of homelessness, and prioritizing youth homelessness should be a focus and a goal. And so that's what makes today's presentation really interesting. Okay, defining the prevention of youth homelessness. This is our new rework definition. So it refers to policies, practices, and interventions that provide supports designed to first reduce inflows into homelessness, to stop people from becoming homeless in the first place, early intervention. 2, reduce the risk that those who have recently become homeless transition to long-term or chronic homelessness. In other words, when someone becomes homeless, don't wait to offer help that includes housing. Help people exit homelessness as quickly as possible. And then we reduce the risk of all those harms that we discussed. Then finally, for those who have exited homelessness, we want to reduce the risk that they will fall back into homelessness. So these are 3 key pieces of the puzzle. It's important when we define what homelessness prevention is to also talk about what it is not. So what happens while young people are homeless when they're engaging services, whether it's employment training or cooking classes or these kinds of things, which are well-meaning and valuable in their own right, but they're not prevention because the person is still homeless. Prevention must have as part of its plan the fact that people have housing, and in particular housing that is safe, affordable, and appropriate. So we need to put our eye on the ball about what we're talking about here. Okay, one of the things that should guide our thinking about who is responsible for homelessness is to look at it from a policy perspective. And we consider homelessness a fusion policy issue, where it's not just the homelessness sector that should be doing this work. Health, justice, child protection, education. There's a whole range of things here that should, and institutions that should be involved in making sure young people don't become homeless. We know that in the general population, about 0.3% of young people have had involvement with child protection. We know that amongst young people experiencing homelessness, it's around 58%. And so why don't we retool child protection to do a better job of supporting people so they don't fall into homelessness? Good news is we've got a presentation today that's going to address some of this. Okay, the typology of homelessness involves 5 interlocking things. Some of these will be issues that are for higher orders of government. Some will be for the sector. Some will be for other kinds of community organizations. So we'll go through this very quickly because we want to get on to the presentations that receive the awards. So the first one is structural prevention. This means really working upstream to address underlying structural factors like the lack of availability of deeply affordable housing in Canada is a big deal. Poverty is a factor that can contribute. We need to address inequity and discrimination, knowing that Black youth and LGBTQ2S youth and Indigenous youth are all overrepresented in the homeless population. We have to address the legacy of colonialism and ongoing racism against Indigenous people, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are really important things to do, but this is not something the homelessness sector can do on its own at all. This is where other orders of government need to play a bigger role. And so we need that kind of action. The second thing is systems prevention. So when I talked about homelessness as a fusion policy issue, public systems are implicated in the creation of homelessness. And, we have many public systems where people exit, right? The healthcare system, people are discharged from hospital into homelessness, even when we know that whatever they went into the hospital for will worsen if we do that. We have people exiting corrections with no supports, and they wind up homeless. And we know from research that if you discharge somebody from prison into homelessness, the recidivism rate is higher. And then finally, youth leaving care, which I mentioned before, that data. You know, we have a public system that is a pipeline into homelessness. And so how do we create the partnerships and the energy around moving forward on this? Okay, all of systems approaches should look at these 4 A's of system prevention to really understand how we should do it and how we should work with people. Okay, early intervention, I'm going to go forward here. This is when we, before people are homeless, where we have a strong knowledge that they might be at risk. So evictions prevention is one that's very important. It's interesting, but with our laws around landlords and tenants across Canada, we actually have data, real-time data on who's been served a notice of eviction. And the process is such that if we know who is in trouble and what the issue is, and if we could contact people and give them support and intervene to support them and or the landlord, we would probably have great success in reducing the inflow into homelessness. The second is family and natural supports. This is developed for the most part working with young people. In the world of homelessness, the family is often seen as part of the person's past, part of the problem that led young people to the streets. But there's interesting work being done in Canada that shows that young people do really well if they have access to supports from their family or from meaningful adults in their life. It doesn't mean returning people to situations that are dangerous by any means, but it usually, in cases where young people are fleeing abuse, it doesn't mean everyone in their family is abusing them. Could be a grandmother, aunt, or uncle. So we need to do more work in that area. The third one that's related to family and natural supports are school-based early intervention programs, where you have a partnership between schools and young people or organizations that work with young people and their families. Every young person who becomes homeless was in school once, and very often there was an adult, a teacher, a coach, somebody knew something was wrong but didn't know what to do. So there's 2 programs here that are in play in Canada: Youth Reconnect, which is modeled on an approach from Australia, where you support young people to stay in their community so they don't have to move to Toronto or wherever. You stabilize the living situation. You work with young people and their families. So the client isn't just the young person, it's also the family. And you help young people stay connected to school. The Upstream project takes it further by adding a key component, which is a needs assessment. So you'll take all the grade 7s and all the grade 8s and survey them. And once you identify people who are potentially going to become homeless or have other problems, you can go in and intervene with supports that are really designed for young people. So crisis prevention. So this is important. This is where it gets at that thing about stopping people who are recently homeless from transitioning to chronicity. So shelter diversion is one that's growing in popularity across Canada. It means that shelters, rather than intake everybody who comes, work with people to see if there are alternatives that would be better for them. And there's lots of knowledge about how to do this well that's emerging in Canada. Rapid rehousing is for people who are recently homeless, but who do not have complex mental health problems, for instance, but gets people into housing, gets them stabilized, and off they go. Host homes is a type of program where young people can go and stay with a family if they're having problems with their family, and then you work on building those relationships up. And then duty to assist. This comes from Wales and is perhaps the most innovative approach to homelessness prevention that we've seen in decades. In many ways, I think it's the biggest paradigm shifting notion since Housing First. And how it works there is that in Wales, if the local government and organizations working with people experiencing homelessness find out that somebody's either at risk of homelessness or has just become homeless, there's a duty that they offer assistance. And they have to do it within 2 weeks. And if the person says yes, they have to remedy the situation within 2 months. And that remedy does not mean getting you to a homeless shelter. It means that you have access to housing and the supports that you need. And here's what happened to their homelessness when they started to implement duty to assist. The number of people entering homelessness crashed, right? And this is a support system that doesn't prioritize, this group of people is more worthy of help than this. Everybody who's in this situation has access to the help. And then finally, housing stabilization. So this refers to what we do with people who have experienced homelessness, have now exited homelessness, and how we may help them. But what do we offer to make sure they never become homeless again? And the Housing First is the best example we have of that, and permanent supportive housing. Those are the most evidence-based interventions in the realm of homelessness. With Housing First, we've also developed Housing First for Youth, which is a program adaptation of Housing First to meet the needs of developing adolescents and young adults. Okay, so great. I'm going to be done in about a minute and a half. So supporting the shift to prevention. April mentioned at the beginning, Making the Shift Youth Homelessness Social Innovation Lab. This is a project that is an idea generator for how to do homelessness prevention. We've currently funded 39 projects across Canada. This is probably the biggest investment in prevention research that's ever happened anywhere. And importantly, we've identified a number of key interventions that you could put in any community in Canada. Right. So we've talked about a bunch of these: family and natural supports, shelter diversion, school-based early intervention, supports for youth leaving care, and Housing First for Youth. And what I want to close with is we've been doing research on all of these, demonstration projects on all of these, trying out variations like Housing First for Youth. We've developed one version for youth leaving care and another that's Indigenous led. But we have the knowledge base. These are things you can do where you live. And if you're interested, you can contact us because we offer training and technical assistance on how to implement these things so that they're built for success for young people and their families. So I'll just close here. If you want more information, and we'll make this slide deck available. If you want to find out more about Making the Shift, there's the link. And if you have questions regarding training and technical assistance, there's the email address. So thank you. Okay, now we'll hand it over to Marian.
Thanks so much, Steve. So now we'll actually be passing it on to Jeannie. So Jeannie, if you could please join us. Hi, Jeannie. So now we're going to be diving into our presentation from our first awards winner, Choices for Youth, and their Momma Moments program. And I'm going to be sharing the slides. Okay. All right.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here today. My name is Jeannie, and I'm just going to share a bit about our Momma Moments program. Go to the next slide. So Choices for Youth was funded in 1990. We're serving over 1,000 youth annually. We focus on housing, employment, family, health. Through innovative program and social enterprises, we are helping youth and young families secure stable housing, education, employment, while also working towards family stability and better health. So Momma Moments is really about supporting young families through a collaborative approach to prevention and early intervention. We truly are about meeting young people and young mothers where they're too, prenatally and postnatally. We currently have 88 moms, but it's equivalent to, we've had over 100 in the last quarter. We've just graduated some out. We have over 137 children. We focus on prenatal. We have 4 groups. So we have 2 satellite sites, which are more rural from our city. And I just listed some quarterly stats that we just completed for our federal reporting, and it just shows the focus on medical interventions and the continuity of care for moms and children, our family interventions, mental health, significant work and support there for our young mothers and children. CSSD and housing. So there are key areas that we are focusing on this quarter. And there's a lot of more other services we are providing. These are just a few. The shift to prevention is really about, supporting opportunities for our moms. It's a low barrier program. You're a mom by definition. We have many young women who their children are in care, some who may have been adopted already and they're having their second child. So we really focus on a non-judgmental harm reduction, trauma-informed approach. And Momma Moments stands for many opportunities for moms, empowering, nurturing, and teachable supports. It's truly a peer-to-peer model and strengths-based group for young and pregnant mothers. We do have program facilitators that guide the conversation and, organize each group setting. However, it's mainly driven by mom to mom, and that is a fantastic model. And, we really see the positive outcomes from that in moms supporting each other through some very challenging situations. We provide moms and their children with wraparound support to navigate the different challenges they face. Our group setting offers, a cooked meal, child minding. We do have many volunteers that help our program run. But also we do case management in regards of education, employment, housing, financial, daycare subsidy, significant piece of work around advocacy with CSSD and our legal options here in St. John's. And, we are reducing the social isolation, not only for moms, but for the children, and, truly breaking down some of those intergenerational barriers that our families face. For many who have come through entrenched child protection systems, which I would suggest is probably over 60% of our current clients, they are limited to social and family supports as well. The Momma Moments program, as I shared, operates in 3 communities in Newfoundland, and programming is once a week. We do have an outreach model. We're recognizing over time, and especially with COVID, that not every young mother, is interested in the group setting, and for many different reasons and barriers. And sometimes, there's conflict of interest. It is a small city and rural even smaller. So we support, various types of programming, and our outreach stream has become something that, the uptake has increased, especially since COVID. We emphasize on the wellness, mental, physical, spiritual health for both mom and child. We currently aren't doing a lot of raw data collection around the children and some of the services that we are offering, but certainly it's something that we hope to do in the near future, and place some emphasis on really what that breaking down those intergenerational barriers looks like for children as they grow up. Mothers have access to healthy recreation activities, resources. We have discussions around family violence, mental health supports, our local services around Bridge the Gap. We bring in guest speakers. We bring in deputy ministers and ministers if we want to talk about topics around CSSD and legal. We really empower moms to be their own voice with our support. We also support education, employment, housing, nutrition, and, to be part of Momma Moments program, there is a certain expectation that you can follow through. But we also do a lot of hand holding and guiding and, working with people who've come from a very traumatic background. That takes time and a lot of networking. Staff act as advocates for the well-being of moms and their children, and this is in relation to the child protection system, ensuring that moms and children's rights are being met. There's a lot of turnover in child protection workers here in Newfoundland, with some families having 20 plus in the last 5 years. So really streamlining those services and supports and ensuring that moms have a voice and that they have legal representation while going through that process. And staff and volunteers provide child minding services and prepare meals for the moms and kids. So during a group setting, we do cook a meal here in our industrial kitchen and at our satellite sites. We always cook an extra meal so that moms can take it home. We, with the child minding support, it's for some moms the only break they get each week. So they really appreciate that. And we have 16 volunteers currently from all walks of life that we are able to provide that service with. And it certainly adds to the social inclusion piece for both mom and children, because oftentimes moms living with complex mental health, their children are very isolated as well. So it does add that inclusion piece for the kids. So working with young families, prevention for us truly means working from a non-judgmental harm reduction and trauma-informed approach. And we're recently in the process of graduating some moms who have been around for 4 or 5 years. And, you know, I think I share that because oftentimes it takes that long to build trust. You know, we value the relationship building with our moms, and navigating multiple systems can be very challenging. So if we truly kind of work from that non-judgmental trauma-informed approach, we have to recognize that oftentimes it takes moms to get where they need to be and to find that stability that they are looking for. We're providing interventions and supports on a daily basis, and I shared some of the stats earlier with you. And also, you know, the whole idea for prevention, you know, as people have support for education, employment, and housing, is that, you know, we are avoiding negative outcomes and the high costs associated with children going in care and families not having the proper supports they need. In one of our satellite sites, rurally, we have over the last couple of years worked with some amazing moms, and currently 75% of that group are now off income support and are contributing members of society for them and their families. So it's, you know, the research has shown and our stats have shown that when families are supported and moms have the things they need, that they can be successful. Our program components is supported guided sessions and an outreach model, which I had spoke to earlier. Moms do have a choice which streamline they would like to go. Even in an outreach, in the outreach service, they still will get the same level of support in regards of the wraparound supports. They just wouldn't attend a physical group. An adapted approach for young families. You know, one of the things that we are really excited about is that we do have an integrated service site here at Choices for Youth. And over the last number of years have advocated for the medical piece. I'm pleased to share and excited to say that we do have 2 family physicians who are provide prenatal postnatal support. So they meet the moms prenatally, they're in the delivery room, and they also provide weekly service here on site. We do have a public health nurse, a nurse practitioner who's connected to our program, as well as an addictions and mental health counselor and family therapist. So for the continuity of care of moms and children, it's a one-stop shop. And, you know, each quarter we're doing over 500 medical interventions, and typically between 150 to 170 medical appointments for both mom and children. Along with the medical piece, you know, we do liaison with community partners to streamline some education and employment services. You know, work with our local liaisons within our housing community here in St. John's, and navigate some of the complex systemic issues that families face in relation to CSSD and our legal system. The Momma Moments program and team. So we're a service delivery approach focusing on peer-to-peer and wraparound supports. We focus on participants and the broader community-based approach, which is key to our success. Collaboration is very important. The team works in a collaboration with many community partners and agencies, and oftentimes that is other local community groups and supports. We are working on the advocacy piece within systems, which takes a lot of advocacy and time. And, you know, we continue to do that work to have more of a collaborative approach within systemic programs and government. Staff truly support the needs for the children and early intervention support. So we're able to break down some of those barriers, especially if kids, if we know there's substance use and misuse and they've been exposed to that. You know, our physicians can do referrals and liaison with our children's hospital, and hopefully with the early intervention, you know, kids can be successful. And, you know, we sit in ISSP meetings at school. Oftentimes our moms are probably reading at, you know, a lower grade, and there's literacy issues. So having that support as kids enter into the school system is also really important. And when working with mothers, the team focuses on supporting them as women and people, and looking at, you know, what are some of their other goals and objectives to being successful. And once they have stable housing and, they have supports for their mental, physical health, we truly kind of then zoom in on things that they identify and what will help them to be successful and enhance stability for their family. The Momma Moments program and team really focuses on advocacy and support for housing initiatives. We've recently accepted a leading practice by Health Centers Organization for our peer-to-peer model. We've been a selected winner for the Making the Shift Youth Homeless Prevention Awards, which we're very grateful for. In addition to program staff, there are medical physicians, nurse practitioner, public health, family therapist, and addictions and mental health counselor on site. And we continue to enhance those collaborations and the importance through our collection of data of the value of that continuity of care for moms and children. We offer Suboxone and methadone supports, which has been fantastic. It's probably only in the last 5 years that our child protection system weren't removing kids because moms were on methadone. So to be able to offer that service on site in a non-judgmental way has really enhanced moms being able to access the appropriate addictions support they need. Our impact and success, reduce rates of childhood apprehension with prevention. We see great success in our families being able to stay together, with our advocacy work, ensuring that if kids do have to be apart from their families, that, moms have access as frequent as possible, that there's engagement from the mom and the lives of the children if they are in care or with significant other placements. We focus on greater educational employment outcomes for families, as shared in one of our rural areas. That was in partnership with Women in Trades and, moms getting some scholarships to do some trade work, very successful financial outcome for those folks. Young mothers and kids work hard to overcome the challenges and build brighter futures. Every mom has dreams and goals, and we work on those bit by bit. We measure success in small pieces at times and celebrate the larger successes of all our families. By combining healthy interventions for the mom and taking a preventive approach with the kids, the program ambitiously works towards delivering intergenerational changes by breaking cycle of poverty and homelessness. Being here for 19 years and doing the work at Choices for Youth and identifying the moms who really needed the advocacy and support, which is how Momma Moments program was initiated. We've also recognized that there's a huge piece of work around the family natural supports component. Oftentimes, a lot of our families, if they do need support and services or intervention from Children's Protection Services, they look to families to do kinships or significant other places with their children. So oftentimes it's navigating and mediating some of that piece. But the work with our family natural supports truly works with the mom and their identified family natural supports. Ultimately, the long-term goal would be that these families are connected in the greater community. And once, Choices for Youth is no longer in their lives, they will have some stable and natural supports. It's been fantastic to get funding to do this piece. And, we are looking at different areas of how we can accommodate that. We are doing a lot of family mediation work before it gets to court and helping, in custody and access situations, but also really doing some great work with moms and some of their identified supports, especially their own file of origin and families who throughout the years may have been disconnected by dysfunctional child protection systems. So we are excited to have 2 family natural supports as part of our team, and we are looking to enhance and grow that in the future. The family natural supports team supports young people and their families by facilitating the process of reconnection, offering counseling, and continuously working with the young person to help them achieve their goals. Looking ahead, we continue to expand the program to offering it to supports youth and young families. We do have a third program facilitator currently, which has helped us expand to our 4th location in a rural area outside of St. John's. We are looking at hopefully the completion of the Young Parents Resource Center. Excited to share that our 14 units of affordable housing, which has been built over the last year, We will be housing at least 6 moms in the next couple of weeks while we wait for the completion of other units. So they are, that has been something that has been in the works for at least 11 years. We did our first planning charrette, so it's really nice to see it come to fruition. And we will be housing 14 young women and children, with 4 of those units being for women fleeing domestic violence from any program within Choices for Youth, and the other 10 units will be for young women and children. So we are very excited about that. We are currently launching a new partner partnership program with the Janeway Children's Health Center, and which would be the pediatric unit and women's health, to support the healthy development of children, of moms who are experiencing challenges with substance use and related issues. There is an identified gap in, they are seeing about 200 women per year that are not connected to any organizations or community groups, who typically historically have no prenatal care and who are experience substance use and misuse. So we're excited to start that partnership and hopefully grow that into something bigger and better. And we are starting that with a pilot of 6 moms over 16 weeks with intense case management and navigating systemic work, you know, making sure that they have housing supports, you know, if they're involved with child protection, make sure they have legal supports. So we are currently in that phase and look forward to seeing how that will roll out and hopefully grow it to be bigger and better.
Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. And now we're going to pass it on to Heather from StepStones for Youth for her presentation. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and reshare. And Heather, if you could join us on stage.
I am here, but the video is not showing. I think I've been blocked, my video. Here we go. All right. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. And thank you, Jeannie, for that was an awesome presentation. You folks are amazing, and we're so proud to be receiving this award alongside you. So you're also doing a lot. So it's amazing. So I'm going to be just telling you a little bit about our program called Safe at Home at StepStones for Youth, and just go into a little bit about how we came to start this program and what it looks like for sort of as a basic beginning to it. So before we begin though, I think it's important to just identify that foster care has traditionally been much of a pipeline to homelessness. And so we see that, I think if we can just go to the next slide, we see that, you know, foster care does lead to homelessness through a lot of, you know, different reasons. As Stephen said, we approximately 58% of young people from that are homeless currently are from the child protection system. We know that young people are 193 times more likely to become homeless who have been through the foster care system. So we know this is an issue. We know that it is something that needed to be addressed. We also know that, you know, young people enter into poverty almost immediately after leaving the foster care system. And this is also a reason that a lot of young people end up in the system again, meaning that their parents had been in the foster care system. And then, you know, they have children, and those children end up in the foster care system about 2 times as likely than other people. So another piece that I think that's really important to us is that we also know that traditional models of intervention don't typically work with this population, and that approximately, some people have said approximately 80% of this population does not utilize the available supports in a community. So this has been something that at StepStones we've been trying to address, and we've been trying to look at what can we do, what can be different, and how can we impact change and outcomes. Another key piece I think that's really relevant is that, you know, young people in the foster care system, as individuals have mentioned today, have many workers, are exposed to workers over and over and over again. And despite the best efforts of the workers, they will not be in the lives of the young people long term. Generally speaking, they will not be in their life. And this has been an issue around, you know, I think us re-examining our role as service providers. And what does that mean for us as a service provider when we know that, we might work really well when we're involved with a young person, but we know that our support is not going to continue. So how do we change the way we work to ensure that those young people continue to be supported after we leave? So next slide, please. We also know that there's massive financial implications to this issue, right? Not that that's the reason that we should do what we do, but I think it is important to note, and we don't like to talk about those financial implications, but when young people from the foster care system are not supported, we know that the outcomes are significant. So they're dropping out of high school, they're entering they're not getting employment, they're entering into the shelter system, they're experiencing mental and physical health issues, right? So those things have a real cost to society. And just, I'm going to talk about the cost of the program as well. And the cost of this program is, it costs something to be able to support young people. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper than it is when we look at the outcomes and what has to happen in that area. Next slide, please. So how did we get here? So at StepStones, we started with what I call traditional intervention. And when I say traditional intervention, I'm thinking things like tutoring, life skills, food banks, clothing banks, counseling services, service navigation, youth and transition kind of support, emergency funding, scholarships, educational support. So that's where we really started. We said, okay, if we're going to be working with the young people from the foster care system, let's put in all the sorts of supports possible and let's see what happens. We also did what, more traditional, I suppose, housing intervention. So we at the beginning had a transitional house for young people from the foster care system. We currently give out portable housing grants. We still support young people in moving into their new homes and to doing housing navigation. So those are kind of the pieces that we put into place. And then the third piece that in the last 10 years, 12 years that we've been working in this space, we also believed in the value of supportive natural relationships. So creating mentorship opportunities and long-term support people. And what we found as we went along, we started looking at, what is working, what is not working. When a young person is successful, why are they successful? How do they become successful? Those kinds of things. And success was kind of rated in the area of, did they attain stable housing? Were they able to enter back into the education system? Were they able to meet the goals that they had identified for themselves? But when we looked at those things, we said we were interested in what were the predicting factors that would change that. And the three things that really came out over and over again, where, obviously housing support, so strong housing stability, and support networks and a sense of belonging were really those two other key things that, in my opinion, in the past were kind of the nice to haves, right? They were like, okay, let's get all these other things into place. And if they have supportive relationships and they have belonging, that's great too, right? That's even better. But what we realized is that was kind of a predicting factor in whether or not they were going to be able to have all those other things put into place. And that for us started to shift our thinking around, okay, so if that's really one of the basics of what people need, young people from this population specifically need, then how are we going to create a program around that? Next slide, please. So one of the things I think that is important to note right off the bat here is that independence and self-sufficiency have been sort of those two terms that we constantly use, and I've heard through many, many years as being the foundation for what we want for young people. So it impacts how we do programming, how people, have written policy, and how we act in our practice. But the factor for me has always been is we're never really independent. No one is ever truly self-sufficient. We always rely on other people in our lives. I am here because of all these amazing people who have helped me along my way. It's not just because I was completely independent. So that goal has been misguided, and the interventions around it have, it's no surprise that a lot of our interventions focus on this idea of trying to create independence for young people. But at StepStones, we don't believe and the research doesn't support that independence is the goal that we're looking for. It's that interdependence, and that's that natural support systems that actually should be the goal. And it should really define all of our programming and everything that we, every place that we go from there. So we know that natural supports are the answer to changing some of these outcomes. And so we built a program around that idea. Next slide, please. So to get into the details of the program, basically this program, is to increase housing outcomes and to increase belonging and support networks for young people who have experienced foster care and the group home system, and who are transitioning out. Our ages, we actually just reduced our age to 10, but most of our ages are, around 16 to the 25 mark. But we are starting to look at whether or not we can service a younger population as well. Next slide, please. So what does it look like? So our program really starts in the area of, one area that we have found is critically important is the idea of trust building. So young people in the foster care system, as everyone knows, have been let down by a lot of systems that were designed to support them. So all of these systems that young people have been told this is going to help, in their experience, has hurt them or has let them down, especially at the point when they're being forced to exit the foster care system. So this system that has said, we're going to love you and care about you and take care of, support you and take care of you, is now saying, well, unfortunately, you're not allowed to stay here. So trust is obviously impacted. And so one of the first things that we have to do as an organization is let the young people know that we are not like that, and that we are not going to let them down. So we are not going to be sort of a system that has traditionally let them down. How do we do that? We do that through engagement activities, through involvement in our other programs. We have, mentorship programs. We have classes. We have dinners. We have different things that young people are interested in. And that's the first step. And I think that's a step that we can't avoid, right? And any other program that is hoping to do this kind of model can't avoid that trust is an important piece. And then the connection work begins. So really the young person is connected to a worker, and that worker's only job is to find connections with the young person's support. And that's through, mobility mapping, looking at their history, looking at previous connections that they may have had and lost, and deciding whether or not those connections are worth pursuing or looking into again. And this is really guided by the young person deciding who it is that they want to explore and who they don't. Our goal at this point is to find 50 connections. And those don't all have to be positive connections, right? It's just who was in your life, at least 50 people. What's interesting about this point of the program is that in the past, when we used to work with young people from foster care, one of the things that I used to say was that young people come to us and they don't have anyone in their lives to support them. And although that's true, although that when you ask a young person in the foster care system, do you have anybody to support you? Many, many, many young people say, no, I'm completely alone and I'm isolated. When we start asking the right questions, we do find that, yes, they don't right now have anyone in their life, but they did. And we can go back and we can find those people, and they're not all negative connections. In many cases, they were positive connections that they were disconnected through by moving, by the system basically that has let them down. The next step is to identify 5 of those 50 or 50 plus connections who could actually present themselves as a possible long-term connection and a long-term person in the person's life. What we're looking for is 2 primary individuals one primary individual who can offer a housing support option, a secondary person who can offer a secondary home support option, and then 3 other individuals who can really create tangible, meaningful interaction with a young person. So kind of building out that support network around a young person. And then I think that this is the most important part of the program, is that it is not over once those individuals are found. So what we do is we work with those individuals, we provide psychotherapy to the new network of people that are around the young person. We provide mediation support. Maybe they, need some service navigation support. So we connect them to our service navigators who can help them find different services in the community that they need to. We have housing grants. So if there's additional expenses in terms of housing the young person, they can, apply for some of our housing grant money. We might refer them out to some of the Reconnect programs that are amazing in our communities, who can do some of that other work with the young people. So we really continue to work with a young person and their new sort of chosen family or their new support network for the next 2 years. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that, so this is kind of going back more into it, but the point of trying to find those connections is the point that a lot of people are really interested in. And so we have a process of asking certain questions to identify these individuals. We use technology to try to find some of these individuals in their past. And I think the big difference here is that each of these individuals has a tangible role, and they have tangible activities. So they commit to certain things in a young person's life. So this might be around cultural connections. It might be around education. It might be physical or mental health. It might be life skills development. It doesn't really matter. It depends on the young person. But it matters that the individuals make a commitment, and that commitment is very, measurable. So we can hold that person, the person in part of the support network, accountable to those pieces. The other thing too is that this is an ongoing process. So this doesn't stop at the time when you say, okay, well, we've got 50, we've got 5, we're done. Right? As you start to get to know a young person, as you get to know their support network, you start to discover more and more people that might be able to be involved. When I say these numbers, the 50, the 5, those are minimum numbers. So obviously the more, the better, as long as that they're positive connections in the young person's life. And of course, the young person is part of that decision-making in terms of if they are going to be a positive connection for them. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, I wanted to let you know the cost involved. So right now we're at approximately a $13,500 cost per youth in the program per year. And so this is an intensive program. This is a dedicated work that is specifically for this purpose. It's specifically to find connections. It's important that the worker's role is really nothing else but to find and support the new network that is being built for a young person, because I think a lot of the times in the past, this has been work that has been sort of at the side of a desk, right? You have all these other responsibilities and you have to do connection work. And what we have found is that connection work is complicated. It can be quite messy, and it's extremely time consuming. So this is why it's really important that this program has a dedicated person who's for this. And then what we did look at, though, is that how much is cost savings is this? So if we look at the province and we look at how much money is being spent on some of the other pieces involved in a young person's life and keeping them in care or keeping them homeless, we look at there's massive cost savings for each cohort of young people who's exiting the care system. And we did, a little bit of analysis on this and looked at about $11.5 million in cost savings just for the, 1 year of a cohort of young people being exited the care system. Next slide, please. I do want to mention there, though, in that slide, it does mention also that, of course, not only is it cost savings, but it's also that these young people have the supports that they need. They have permanency and they're going to have success. So the last piece is, why does it work? So, I mean, we've talked about it saving money. It maintains cultural connections for young people. It maintains the connections that they've had in the past, or reconnects them to the connections that they had in the past. It creates long-term change. So we're really, really focused on long-term change versus short intervention. It prevents young people from ever having to become homeless in the first place, which is, we know that, as Stephen said, that, there's massive implications to a young person becomes homeless. So if we can prevent it, we need to. It's a community approach. It's external to the child protection system. So sometimes that allows us to connect with people who might not be as interested in connecting. And the best part is it's possible to do at any stage of child protection. So that concludes my presentation today. And I think we're going to be doing some questions now. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for that, Heather. And we're going to be moving on to the panel discussion. These were such great presentations and so much information. We're running a little over time, so we're wondering if the panelists are comfortable with staying an extra 10 minutes to go to 2:25 to answer any audience Q&A. And if folks need to leave, that's okay. But if that's all right with you, we'd love to extend it a little bit. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. All right, I'll hand it over to Marian and Steve.
Great, thank you. And thank you for those great presentations. There's a lot I learned from them, and I'm very impressed with this. We'll ask you just a few questions, and Marian and I will take turns. What do you think have been your greatest success in the programs? And Jeannie, I have one specifically for you. Like, in what way does your work on interrupting apprehensions by child protection count as prevention?
That's a good question. I wasn't prepared for that one.
Curveball.
I think, supporting families with all the components of their lives, their physical, mental health, their the income, financial, the housing piece. When we create stability within those areas of life, we create stability within families. And so navigating those pieces with the families oftentimes lends, insight into the complexities that families have, and CSSD are more inclined, if we're at the table, to be at the table as well. And, so we continue to kind of break down some of those barriers and judgments that families often face. And some of our families are at a deficit just having a file of origin themselves. So we kind of, we really kind of talk about that. And is it fair? I had a file of origin that our families are faced negatively before their children are even born into that system. So hopefully, with the stability in people's lives, advocating with private landlords, standardized rates, breaking down some of the judgments of single parents and parents on income support and landlords not willing to rent to them. All that combined with the wraparound supports and the continuity of care in many areas, I feel that, we are intercepting the apprehensions because families are getting what they need. We are there in the advocacy role. And even if an apprehension is inevitable that it happen, we're there the next day to pick up the pieces and ensure that the rights of children and families and reunification is always at the forefront. I probably didn't answer that totally, but I think the wraparound supports is instrumental, and the continuity of care, as we have seen over the last number of years, even with addictions and mental health, families are going home with their children with the right supports in place and the right monitoring. And, we have a privilege at our site to have all the services. So from a CSSD perspective, they seem to like that, although we oftentimes provide the transportation and the navigation piece. It is favorable for the families we work with if they are accessing services, but we also ensure that they're not serviced to death, and there's expectation that they attend 10 different services to please the child protection system.
Great, thank you. Heather, maybe you can take a moment to talk about greatest success in the program so far. And I just want to comment, I loved your critique around the misguided focus on independence. It's great. So
Thank you. I think, to be honest with you, a little bit of a shift is probably one of our greatest strengths of the program, is shift in thinking, and being able to start looking at how do we do this work and how do we do it when it has been traditionally sort of at the side of the desk kind of work, and how do we how do we support young people and get out of their lives but not leave them without interdependence. So I think that has been one of the things that I've liked to see the most in terms of the shift in everyone's thinking around it. And then even in terms of the shift with other people who are working with a young person to say, like, we don't want to be at the graduation. We don't want to be at a young person's graduation. That's not success for us, right? We want to have 10 other individuals who are just cheering along in the crowd and saying, we're so proud and we want to hear about it. But if we don't, that's okay too, because if those 10 other people, those natural support systems were in place there, then that's success to us. So I would say that's the biggest shift for us.
Great, thank you. Marian, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so this question's for both of our panelists, and I too echo Steve's comments earlier, just saying thank you, great presentations, and just real good depth information about the work that you're doing. So I want to say congratulations on those aspects. So my question for both of you is, what do you wish governments knew about preventing youth homelessness? So maybe we'll start with Jeannie, and then we'll end off with Heather.
A couple of key points I think for that is that it truly starts from childhood. So, I think we have an opportunity here at Choices. I shared earlier, we don't necessarily track the raw data currently, but I feel like we will in the very near future. So government needs to understand that the early intervention and breaking down those barriers of, violence, domestic violence, child protection, entrenched homelessness, mental health, and other areas of concern. Relationships are key. Oftentimes we have families that have had 25 plus social workers in the life of a 7-year-old. So, really investing in the child protection system of, trained staff and staff who stick around for a while, that's very intrusive to families who have complex trauma. Understanding that outcomes takes time if we're really truly going to work from a trauma-informed approach, that it's, it doesn't, we don't get all the stats in a year and that people are successful because they're involved. It takes time, relationships, decreasing barriers to traditional medical services and supports. Oftentimes there's a lot of punitive approach around missing appointments and things. So really reducing the barriers and easier accessibility for families, enhancing family units, really if we're talking true prevention, and shifting the financial to, supporting some respite services and babysitting, daycare shortage is something we're facing here in St. John's and I'm sure across the country. So a lot of times children, having them get their social and emotional needs met is also just as crucial as it is for the moms to have an opportunity to attend their appointments. I think creating stable environments and, really, the system currently feels like it's a reactive approach to protection. And so really investing in families and empowering them that, everyone's doing the best they can. The biggest barrier we find is that families are at risk of becoming homeless when their kids go in foster care because they lose their child tax credit. And so we've done a lot of advocacy work here in Newfoundland, and nothing has come to fruition yet other than our own affordable housing units that we have. So oftentimes moms are in a situation where if their children go in care for a period of time, they are and have become homeless because they can't afford the rent, they can't afford their bills. So by having our own affordable housing with our Cashin Avenue house, we have 5 units of affordable housing, and our new housing units that will break down those barriers because we will, they'll be paying affordable rent and we'll be able to navigate that piece. So I think understanding all those things, but definitely that, the earlier the intervention, the more success for families and kids.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Jeannie. Heather?
Thank you, Jeannie. I think that I could say a lot, coming after that, I think you just nailed it on so many different levels. But just to add to it, I would say, one of the things that we've always been kind of looking at is this concept of foster care. As originally, it was an idea that was supposed to be a temporary system, and it was designed that way. And yet young people are growing up in the foster care system and, exiting out of the foster care system. So really going back to what foster care was designed for. Obviously, the ideal is to prevent a young person from ever entering into foster care, which is, what Jeannie has been speaking about. And that's the goal there for sure. And if if a young person does end up in the foster care system, how do we get them out of the foster care system? How do we build out their support networks around them before they grow up in that system? So that's the one thing, is kind of looking at foster care is a little bit different, or maybe how it was originally designed. And the I think that the only other piece is, you know, really that looking at upstream thinking and trying to figure out, I think a lot of our systems, as you know, we have been mentioning, have been reactive. So, right. So it's once a problem has happened, then we put in services, right? But where is that middle ground? We know who's at risk. Like the evidence is there, the information's there. So why are we not focusing on those populations, and how can we focus on that population more, saving and it saves a lot of money, right? If that's all that's being listened to, then that's fine, because it actually saves tons and tons of money, and it supports so many people from not ever having to enter those systems in the first place. So I think that would be one of the things that would be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate it. So I think we're going to dive straight into the audience questions now. And if I'm wrong, somebody tell me, but I just got a prompt, so I'm thinking that's what we're doing. So the first question is actually for you, Heather. It's asking, how do you help the youth navigate their renewed connections?
Great question, because that's the hardest part. The hardest part is, one is, kind of working with a young person to say, hey, I know adults have really let you down in your life, but how about we introduce new adults into your, or those adults back into your life, or some adults from the past back into your life. That's so for a lot of young people, as you can imagine. For me, I would be like, no, right? Had I had the same experiences. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is really working with a young person to start deciding how to engage with that individual. And so really what it is, it's led by the young person. So how do you want to engage with this person? And just asking them the questions is a lot of the time is how we start working with a young person and the new adult, or the reconnected adults in their life. Also really spending time with the adult, because this is going to bring up, and I think this has been some of the limitations in the past work, is that a lot of people we spend a lot of time with a young person because we're very uber focused on that individualized approach for a young person. And we don't spend a lot of time on the support network. And the support network is going to have a lot of concerns, right? They're going to have things that are coming up for them. They're going to say, well, 10 years ago, this is what happened. How are we going to mitigate that risk now? And like those kinds of things. So not just spending time with a young person, but spending time with the other adult in their life. And then really a lot of mediation work. Right? What are concerns for you? What are concerns for you? How can we address both of those concerns together? So we do kind of from our mentorship program, we have match meetings. So we used to do in our mentorship program, we have match meetings. Now in a natural setting, it's a little bit different, but really engaging in activities together, and building up new experiences with the new support network. So is that, we're not just sitting in front of a person, an adult, and saying, okay, let's talk to each other, right? We're actually doing things together. We're having fun together again. We're experiencing, like, what am I interested in? What are you interested in? How do we do that together? And then through that, talking to both parties about what that's going to look like, setting boundaries together, those kinds of things.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I have one more question, and please, I know there's lots of questions in the Q&A, so apologies to everyone. There's more questions than we'll have time for today. But this question is for you, Jeannie. Could you speak a little bit more about breaking down intergenerational barriers? And also, kind of a two-part question, do you offer culturally appropriate wraparound services for Indigenous or Inuit moms?
So I'll just speak to the breaking down the intergenerational barriers. I guess, when we are working with the family unit and we're, supporting the children. I talked earlier about both mom and child go to the group setting, have a cooked meal. The children avail of a play group type setting with safe and secure adults. So that, for the social inclusion piece for the children and developing healthy relationships outside of their home. Oftentimes it could be a single mom and a child who that is their immediate family unit. Identifying any social emotional deficits that children may have. So, making sure that they're connected to the proper supports, whether it's counseling, assessments for autism or other behavioral development cognitive needs. Food insecurities and poverty. We provide snacks, we provide meals. The medical piece, we're keeping children out of emergency rooms and getting continuity of care. So there's appropriate follow-up and service where, especially during COVID, there was a big disconnection between our family physicians. By supporting moms and empowering them to make positive lifestyle and changes, hopefully it reduces their exposure to domestic violence. It's supporting legally for moms to go through court processes for emergency protection orders and keeping them and their children safe. So all the wraparound supports, I think, is part of breaking down those intergenerational barriers. And that's just some examples currently. And yes, we do support Indigenous young women and mothers. We do not have a large number who we are currently supporting because we do have First Light, who is here in St. John's, that is their primary focus. But the women that we do support, we are guided by a lot of what they want and share. And we are very mindful of cultural sensitivity and will seek other professionals in the community who that is their specialty if we are, if there's gaps in our services and how we can enhance and promote. So currently we do have 3 Indigenous women we are supporting. And we hope to have more diversity as we expand and grow our programming.
Thank you, Jeannie. We appreciate that. So actually, we're going to go to a last question, and I'm going to go back to you, Heather. How do you teach interdependence in making that distinction? And could you give us 2 examples?
How do we teach it? We don't teach interdependence. We try to do it in every piece of our work. And I'm trying to clarify the question, I guess, in terms of teaching, in terms of staff, maybe, or, talking to others about interdependence. I think ultimately the idea is that one of the things that we're looking at is every part of our program should have an aspect. And I would argue that every part of every program out there that is working with youth in foster care should have an aspect where we look at who is in the young person's life and who have they been disconnected from, and how do we bring those people back. And so that's how we do interdependence. Like I would say like that. And if I think about my own life, if everybody thinks about their own life, right? And they think about, how did I get here? Who was influential in my life to get me here? And who do I reach out to on a regular basis? Who do I call? When the holidays come, where do I go, right? Am I by myself all the time? Or are there other people in my lives? And, those people might be annoying. Those people might be frustrating. Those people might also not be perfect. And that's the other thing that we often focus on in child protection. My background is child protection, as people heard, like there was always this focus on this perfect family or this perfect scenario where all the people were perfect in the young person's life. And the reality is that's not a case for anyone, right? But it's about navigating that imperfection in a way that ensures people are safe, of course, and making sure that there aren't negative influences in a young person's life that can hurt them, but also trying to figure out like all those people in your life and how do you put them into the right place for a young person and having the young person guided. So how do we do it? One, we have dedicated time for it. And that is like one thing that I think I've mentioned this 3 times. I'm going to mention it again. It's there has to be dedicated time to do this work. It cannot be something just a nice to have. It's a must, and it's almost like needs a dedicated worker for it, right? So that's the first thing. Changing people's minds away from, like in social work, I think we think of ourselves as the one who does it all, and that makes me a good social worker. If I do it all, if I'm there in crisis, then I'm a good social worker. Let's reframe that into, how am I a good social worker? How am I a good community worker? Well, I'm a good community worker when I find all these other people in the community who can do it for a young person, and it's not me all the time. That's what makes practice good. And I think, and finding the right people to do that, and they're not always paid to do it. In fact, the more people who are unpaid to do that work in a young person's life, the further it goes. And then I guess to answer the question slightly different is working with a young person to kind of identify that some of those people who have said, you know, those paid people in their life who have said that they're always going to be around, the young people know that they're no longer around, right? The young person identifies that, but being able to support the young person in their journey of realizing that there are going to be people who are around and they don't have to be paid to take care of them and to support them, and that they aren't going to hurt them moving forward. And that's sort of a journey that we go on with the young person, acknowledging their history and the trauma past.
Hi, this has been such an amazing conversation, and I wish we had more time. We have so many questions in the Q&A. So what our team is going to be doing is actually going to be addressing as many questions as possible in a future blog post. So stay tuned for that, everybody. And I wanted to pass it back to Marianne for a special announcement.
Thanks, April. Yeah, first, thank you to everyone. This has been just fantastic. I really enjoyed being part of this today, and I'm pleased to announce that this program will continue in 23. So Canada Life is very proud to let everyone know today that yes, the award program will take place in 23. So stay tuned for more information from Making the Shift and A Way Home on this great program, so we can continue these conversations and more learnings and going from there. Back to you, April.
Woohoo!
We'll be sending all of the registrants a package talking about the awards. Staying tuned for the date for the application process for 2023 and the recording from today. So please expect that coming into your inboxes. But besides that, I just wanted to thank everybody so much for joining us today. It's been fantastic. It's just so much learning. And you can find the recording of our webinar today at makingtheshift.ca/resources. But yes, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great day.